All right, so did not follow. Oh, that's good. Glad you didn't follow. This trade still need to play out, right? I mean, we need to see how they play out. And the whole point of the membership is not to just blindly follow me, but to find your own trades. So, but let me go ahead and explain why I did what I did. So one of the things that I did today, we talked about it this morning, was Sirius satellite radio. So, you know, Pandora got a big old pop and Sirius got a big old drop because there's speculation that Sirius is going to come out and make a play for Pandora. And, you know, look, that may happen. And maybe people won't like that tie-up. But actually, I kind of would like the tie-up if they did that. So, you know, it had a nice setup on the daily. I said this morning that $4 or close to that was where I was looking to try and get in. And what I was looking at was on this pullback, which is pretty good volume too, 93 million shares. And this could continue to fall. I mean, that's why I only took half my position. So I took 500 shares at 427. All right. And I want to get 1,000 shares in my long-term hold account. And, you know, look, if this thing comes down to $4 or so, or to the 200-day moving average right around 408, where there's some price support, or even $4, I'm probably going to add that other half position. Like I said this morning. Oh, okay. So, wow. As we're talking, Sirius XM chair Maffei recently approached Pandora board to express renewed takeover interest. So apparently there's some truth to the rumor. I think that would be a great tie-up. I really do. I think that they would be you know, they're going to strip out the stuff from Pandora that they don't like, and they're going to take the stuff that they do like, and I think the thing could become a cash flow machine. So that's just my thinking. If this thing goes down to, remember, this is my long-term hold portfolio, right? So if it were to come all the way down and test $3.70, I mean, look, I'm saying I might add at $4. If it continues to have a drop like it did today, you know, I'll look for it. I'll be watching to see where we start to find some decent support, and that's probably where I'll look to add. It's a very thick stock, 1.6 to 1.8 billion shares in the float. So, you know, this is one I'm going to be patient with. And like I said earlier this morning, holiday season is typically the first quarter is the best quarter for Sirius satellite radio. And we just got car sales out yesterday, and Sirius comes with, you know, new cars. So we'll see. We'll see how that plays out. But I thought I would start to dip my toe on this dip because I think it's an overreaction. We'll see how that plays out. All right, that's enough about Sirius. Let's talk about FSTR, which you know, was a swing pick. Back when it pulled back into, now my first buy, I took a small buy in it at 11 and change. Can't remember exactly what it was, but then I added at 9 and change, right? And really, this was off of the thesis of a potential infrastructure play, and no matter who became president, and that turned out to be, so the first target was $13, and we actually broke over that today, so I went ahead and locked in some profits. I wanted 14 today, but it was being stubborn, and so I sold half of the position and at 13.82, right, which pretty nice little trade in a pretty short period of time, and still holding a piece because now we've actually broken out over this flat top breakout area. We're over the 200-day moving average. We're over also this long-term trend line. So could this continue to go? There's a big gap on the daily to fill up to about 18 bucks. So you know, this infrastructure play, if the infrastructure plays continue to work out, this one could move higher. What I'd actually like to see on this one is I'd like to see it pull back again, or maybe consolidate here for a bit, build a nice little flag pattern, right? Pull back, build a nice little flag, and then go, right? And maybe I'll look to add back somewhere around this 1297 area. If it were to, you know, have a low volume pullback and just consolidate here, then I would look to get back or to add back to that position. So we'll see what it does. And then let's see, the other one that I did today that I sent the alert out on was here. And of course, TC2000 is gonna freeze up on me because that's what it does. So, you know, as you know, I've traded in and out of here several times. And I recently picked up some shares at, what was it, $1.50 or $1.40, something like that. And I just added to the position as it was pulling back. And if we can ever get the chart back, I will I hate it when it does this. All right, here we go. So, you know, it had this pull to the 100 EMA, and I put in a little buy order at $1.30, and it filled. And both my long-term hold and my short-term swing account. And, you know, it had a nice big pop off of, this was off of earnings. It's been pulling back on lower volume. And it was approaching this area of potential price support. So I went ahead and added to the position. We'll see. I mean, it was kind of interesting. I mean, as soon as I added to the position, it had a little bounce. But it's still, you know, it's still messing with this trend line here. So, you know, it could continue to drift lower. If it loses that 100 EMA, it likely is going to come down here and test somewhere around $1.12 or so. And then I would look for that to hold as support. And then I may add again there. We'll see. Again, this one is a turnaround story heading into the holiday season. They guided a little bit lower for holiday sales. That disappointed the street, I think. Got price targets on this thing from different analysts, anywhere from $1.25 up to $2 and change. So I like the story there. So that's why I went ahead and added. We'll see how it plays out. And that's it. So that's just talking about the trades that we did today. Let's take a look at what happened in the market. So, you know, yesterday we talked about seeing the NASDAQ. I mean, sector rotation is what we talked about, right? So sector rotation is what we've been seeing, moving into financials and oil and energy names. So had a nice little 2-day pullback in the NASDAQ, trying to find some support just underneath the 50 EMA. Now look, this could start to build out a bear flag, and then, you know, we break lower. I mean, I don't like the fact that we took out this shorter term trend line and closed below it. We did try to bounce back above that, as you can see here, but tried it and then wound up closing below that 50 EMA. So price action wasn't all that great today in the NASDAQ, but it was nice to see the sell-off kind of slow down a little bit. let's take a look at the IBB. So we talked about this week, we talked about the IBB potentially coming down and closing this gap that is on the daily. Thought maybe we would get that today, and it didn't quite get there, right? It did bounce just a tad today, but still looking like maybe that's what we're going to do, come down here and fill this gap, and then maybe we get a bounce off of there and head back up towards this trend line. But we'll see. We've got some biotech. It looks like we've got some biotech conferences going on over the weekend, so could get some fuel for the biotech sector for next week out over the weekend. If it's positive or negative news, we'll see what happens. IWM closed below the 8 EMA, and we talked about the fact that this could drift down and close this gap here on the daily and maybe find some support right around 128. If that fails, then maybe we look to come down and test this 125 area as potential price support, which happens to be around the 50 EMA. Let's see. IBB was holding the VWAP until late on the 1 minute chart. Okay. We'll see what happens. I don't necessarily think that this pullback is a bad thing. We talked about that. I think after that huge run we've had, it's a healthy thing to have us pull back. We just don't want to get, we don't want to have too many of these pullbacks in high volume and a high volume breakdown, right? But a lower volume pullback to an area of price support, close some of these gaps on the daily, not necessarily a bad thing. I think that's healthy action. Let's take a look at the IYT. Continues to look pretty healthy. Actually, hold on a second. IYT actually looks pretty healthy, and look, I mean, the airline. So a buddy of mine that flies in here all the time is telling me, he was looking at flights for Christmas and some of and the amount that the flights went up in price is just like amazing. He's like, airlines are just jacking these people that are trying to travel for the holidays. So listen, I think, this is a good time for the airlines holiday season. I think that, and then you've got the shippers, right? UPS, FedEx, those guys, shipping stuff all over the place. So I think it's still a pretty good sector and one to keep a close eye on. It's nice to see it consolidating above the 8 EMA. Let's take a look at financials real quick since I'm here. Financials have been the big winner. Showed a little bit of weakness today, nothing really significant. Still holding up over the 8 EMA. Still a hot sector, but a challenging sector because a lot of those names are big names in the financial sector, right? Big floats and tough to move those, but they've had a pretty amazing run. And I would say they're probably overbought and a little bit extended, but it still looks like a pretty hot sector. And the way to play it is FAS or FAZ. If they do start to break down and pull back, you could look to take a day trade in one of these, either on a breakout, or if this breaks down, then look at FAZ as a potential trading opportunity. So interesting action in gold this week. I've been saying all week long that I'm still cautious on gold, that it still looks to me as though it wants to head lower, right? That it had a bear flag pattern over here, which, then it finally broke down. And then we looked at 112 as being an area that if it broke below, that could become problematic for gold. And it actually broke below 112, but then today we bounced up and actually broke over this trend line, the short-term trend line here, and reclaimed 112, still below the 8 EMA. I'm still not crazy about this sector, but there was a nice day trading opportunity in JNUG and Nugget. Let's see what GDXJ and GDX, they also had a nice little bounce today. Those actually broke back over the 8 EMA. Let me see what JNUG did here. JNUG also closed above the 8 EMA. You know, working its way towards this trend line. It'll be interesting to see what happens there, if it winds up breaking and taking it out, or if it winds up pulling back. JNUG, let's take a look at Nugget. Same thing, closed right, actually just above the 8 EMA. Again, working its way towards that trend line. So maybe this is a base that we get the bounce from. I don't know. We'll have to see. If the dollar remains strong, I think that, you know, is going to be problematic for gold. And we did have a little bit of a pullback in the dollar today. So if the dollar really pulls back and shows some weakness, maybe comes back down and tests this little trend line over here, or fills this gap, then we probably get a bounce in gold and the miners. But it's not a trade that I would want to stay in overnight. I think I would be really cautious there. UVXY, we did get a little bit of action in UVXY this week. Did close above the 8 EMA. Still not a lot of fear out there. If the market really does start to sell off hard, then, you know, we could look for a trade in UVXY or TVIX. Graham was in the room this week and nailed that UVXY. She loves trading that, and we could see more trading opportunities there if the markets continue to roll over, if we do start to see some fear. USO was, you know, the big winner of the week, right? We talked about it here, that you know, it was setting up for a really nice potential snapback if OPEC came to an agreement. They came to an agreement, and but now, you know, look, we've got these gaps on the daily, and we're out of the upper Bollinger Band. We've got a candle that is completely out of the Bollinger Band, two candles actually. So we don't necessarily have to go back down and fill these gaps, just like we didn't do that in the IWM, right? We don't have to do that right away. What we could see here is that we just work our way back into the Bollinger Band, lower volume, build a little flag out, and then look to maybe take out 1178 or $12. So I mean, this needs to absorb this big move that it's had. We had some nice, you know, WLL was turned out to be a pretty nice trade this week, and it's consolidating. I just saw, was it I don't know if there was some calls bought with the $15 strike, or if there was actually, let me look. All right, yeah, so WL had some January 17th call sweep with the 15 strike. All right, but this again has had a big move. It's now got a gap on the daily that could fill, but it's likely going to do whatever oil does. So if oil continues to consolidate, work its way back into the Bollinger Band, and then goes higher, you're likely going to see the same type of action in WLL. I mean, just like A1 said yesterday, throw a dart at an oil name, and it was probably had a nice move this week. Now that needs to be absorbed. All right, let's. So we talked about that. Let's talk about SMH, which had the big pull yesterday. And that was it has been one of the leading sectors. And we talked about yesterday, I really don't want to see another candle like this, right? I mean, that was a big volume sell-off in the SMH to an area of potential price support. And then, we saw a nice little bounce today, which I think was encouraging. But that doesn't mean that this can't build out to be a bear flag and head lower, right? So the next area of support we identified was down here around 66 bucks, right around the 100 EMA. Nice round number. We got some price support there. So maybe it does, build out a little bear flag and come back down and test this area. That is possible. We'll see how it plays out next week. S&P, let's go to the S&P 500. So 219 is managing to hold up as potential price support. We talked yesterday about the fact that if we break down below that 219, likely we could come down here and test somewhere around the 50 EMA and right around 217, 216 in that area for a potential area of support. So the bulls were definitely not as in charge as they have been for the last couple of weeks, but I don't think the bears have really taken control either here. I mean, I still think this is healthy action, and this is what we want to see, right? Even if we pull back to this 216, continue to drift lower on lower volume, I don't see how that would be a bad thing. I think that's a good thing setting up into possibly the Santa Claus rally into the end of the year. Remember, we are going to see some tax loss selling. We've been talking about that too. So that's another thing to keep in mind. Probably going to be some tax loss selling, and towards the end of the year too. So, the low float garbage stocks start making some pretty crazy moves too. So another thing for us to kind of keep an eye out for. Let's see what else we got going on. All right, let's look at some individual sectors. I just heard this guy briefly as I was talking about aerospace and defense. This TC2000 decides to freeze up on me again. That's so awesome. Give me a second. Anybody seen anything moving after hours of particular interest while I'm sitting here waiting? All right, so listen, this is Free Friday, so I'm gonna be sending this out on the web or on Twitter and all that. So I'm just gonna do it right now since we're waiting for TC2000. So alphawolftrading.com, free chat room. Swing trade alerts, which do get sent out, and trade action plans, all kinds of stuff going on over at Alpha Wolf Trading. If you like what I do here, come over there and check us out. Do you guys like that promo? Hold on a second. All right, so aerospace defense. I was just listening to this guy on TV. Apparently, I was kind of just eavesdropping as to what they were saying, but he sounded pretty negative. He thinks everything's priced in because, with the new administration. Could be true, right? That could be true, but still consolidating, and there are gaps to fill on the daily. If this breaks down, likely going to come down and fill those gaps. Katos, which was, which is actually one of my nemesis now. Grinding, right? Heading towards that $8 holla. Broke over this long-term trend line. Could look for this to consolidate here and build a base just below $8. Still wish I still had my shares from down here. That would have been pretty cool. But this is actually looking pretty good, and the aerospace defense sector is still looking real strong. So we'll see what happens with it next week. Biotech, right? XBI, we already talked about biotech. Home builders managed to hold on to this 50 EMA. And if you look at it, it's basically we broke out over this little trend line into price resistance and pulling back. We didn't hold at the 200-day, but now we'll see if this 50-day, actually we didn't hold at the 200 and we didn't hold at the 100. We'll see if the 50 can hold up as support, and this short-term trend line is an area for it to potentially bounce off of. One thing I would say about this one, though, so a couple of things that I don't like about the home builder chart, and one is that the 50 EMA has crossed below the 100 EMA, and the 50 and the 100 have both crossed below the 200 simple. So I'm still not super crazy about home builders, but we'll give it a benefit of the doubt and see how it acts here. See if it bounces, maybe it goes back up and tests that 3460 area and breaks through, or maybe that acts as resistance again and it heads lower. We'll see. I can whine about K-Toast if I want, A1. This is my show, bro. I can whine if I want. All right, XLB. Let's take a look. Sector materials actually holding up fairly well. Steel names had a pretty good day today. I think X was looking pretty strong, right? Which has been consolidating nicely right on top of the 8 EMA. Good move in X. Looks like it probably wants to go lower. Higher. Materials still look pretty good. XLE energy, right, working its way back into the Bollinger Band. XLF, we already talked about financials. Let's take a look at the industrials. Let's see, industrials holding up pretty well, consolidating just above the 8 EMA. Even after CAT tried to get the street to settle down with their estimates. All right, we talked about NASDAQ. So, we talked about we looked at a lot of the big cap NASDAQ trades yesterday. Facebook, Apple, and I know, A1, you want Facebook at 85 bucks. I know. I saw your chart that you put in the chat room too. Yeah, I mean, look, this thing, this is either going to be a double bottom test right here that it bounces off of, or if it breaks down below, I think, I don't know about 85, and I saw your chart, you drew through this candle right here, and you were touching these areas here. I saw what you did with your chart, but let me back this out for a second to the weekly. So on the weekly, I'm drawing the trend line and touching this candle, and I see what you did was you were kind of drawing it through all the congestion, and that makes sense. Like I said, I don't know about 85. I think maybe 105 or $100 test on this is probably pretty doable on Facebook, and that's really where it gets probably more compelling to me, is in that $100 range, right? It's a good round number. I think if it breaks below 100 with conviction, yeah, you probably are going right down to 85 bucks, possibly, right? But keep in mind too, they also announced that $6 billion share buyback program. So, if it gets down to 100, I would think that maybe they start kicking in and picking up some shares. High Crush Partner shows registration 20.69. Okay, so they're doing it. This thing's had a nice pop, I think. HCLP. I'll go back to the big caps tax in a minute. Yeah, this has had a nice run, and they just did a registration for 20 million shares of common stock. So that's going to get hit. And that's industrial metals and minerals. We were just looking at materials, right? Which were looking pretty good, but that one's likely going to take a hit off of that. We'll see what it's a shelf registration, it looks like, so I'll find out where it prices eventually. All right, so let's go back to big cap tech. We talked about Facebook and the levels where that gets kind of interesting. You know, Microsoft pulling back. Actually looks like might be starting to build a bear flag formation here right on top of the 50 EMA. We'll see if that holds. If that breaks down, then maybe it comes down and tests somewhere around this 100 EMA, right around 57.75 or so. Or maybe, you know, if that doesn't hold, then maybe it comes down and tests the, there is a gap to fill on the daily right here. Right, gap to fill down to about 54.50, which is, you know, almost coincides with that 200-day moving average. So, what else we got going on? We looked at Google, which is sitting right on top of or actually right below the 200 simple moving average. So, you know, that's not a real pretty looking setup either. What was the other? Oh, AAPL, Apple. So Apple actually, and they all look kind of the same, but Apple actually probably looks better than the other ones a little bit. But, you know, again, Apple kind of looks like it wants to come down and test around $100, maybe even come down and fill this gap. So big cap tech still looks fairly weak, but I just think that has a lot to do with the fact that we've got this sector rotation going on right now. All right, what else are we looking at? So we talked about industrials, we talked about tech, utilities. You know, we talked earlier in the week, we were watching this head right up into this trend line, came up into resistance. Said, you know, it'll be interesting to see after a 3-day run if this acts as resistance, which we kind of thought was going to happen, or if it pulls back, or if it breaks through, and it didn't. It acted as resistance, and we pulled back, and now potentially we come down here and do a double bottom test, right? We'll see if this area holds a support for utilities. The safety trade does not appear to be all that attractive to people right now. Healthcare, you know, filled the gap. Thought maybe we would get a bounce. We did come down and fill the gap. The next day we did get a bounce. We went right back up into this trend line, found resistance again, and started drifting lower. So, you know, we'll see what happens with healthcare. This is still a really beaten up sector. What was it today? Teva got some bad news, and that one is continuing to move lower. And I do have a starter position in Teva, right? But I am not looking to add, and this is in my long-term hold. I have an alert set around 35 and change to see how it acts, because that is multi-year support. So it did pierce the lower Bollinger Band, but, you know, this is a pretty controlled takedown of Teva. Specialty generics have not been a good sector. And just because it comes down and tests 35 doesn't mean that I'm going to load more shares there. I'm going to wait and see how it acts at that level. And like I said, this is a long-term hold, one that I would be very comfortable holding for years if I have to. But healthcare is still struggling, right? Still struggling. And I think a couple of people in the biotech space and healthcare space have come out and said, you know, look, Trump, everybody thinks everything is going to be okay because it's not Clinton. And the one guy came out and said, you know, I think it could be even worse with Trump. So we'll see. We'll see what happens in that space. All right. Consumer discretionary. So we failed to hold. We failed to hold this area of support. We were talking about it. That was an area that was price resistance, $82. Failed to hold this support. It was trying, but today it failed. So now what we want to see is if we pull back to this $80 area and see if that acts as support, because that was an area that we were trying to get back through and actually just blew right through there. And now we need to see if this pulls back, and the 50 EMA and $80 hold the support. If it doesn't hold, you know, I think that becomes problematic, but we'll see what it does next week. XME energy, this is mining, metals and mining. So interesting action today, right? 32 bucks is acting as a area of resistance, price resistance. Going to go ahead and set an alert on here and see if we get a pop above 32 with conviction next week. XOP, oil exploration, pulling back, working its way back into the Bollinger Band. And last one, retail. Did have a little bit of a bounce in retail. What was it? I think JCPenney got, so we had a couple of names that, one that got an upgrade. JCPenney had a little bounce today. And then we had a couple of retail players that A1 pointed out yesterday that took a pretty good beating off of missing estimates. But retail has never been one of my favorite sectors to get involved in to begin with. But for some, I mean, it is the holiday season. We'll see what happens. I guess there should be some winners in there. I'm just never really, I have no fashion sense, so I have no idea what's going to be hot and what's not. So I just avoid the whole sector. All right, that is the whole take on what happened in the markets. And I guess the question is, what do we think is going to happen next week? And there are some sectors that are just consolidating. It still look pretty darn strong. And like I said, I think that the pullback is healthy. I think the oil trades are probably still going to be worth paying attention to. Could get a nice bounce in IBB. Hold on a second here. Hey, Jonathan, what's up? Hello. Hey, hold on one second. Actually, you know what? I'm going to finish this up and wrap it up. I think things are actually healthy. We'll see how everything pans out. We'll see if we get any news out over the weekend that changes things up a little bit. But this is not. I still don't think you should be chasing anything. You got to be patient. Look for proper setups and all that. No fashion sense, but I bought hoodies. Oh, you kill me, A1. All right, so listen, I'll be back on Sunday morning with stocks to watch for next week, and or at 8 a.m. on Ticker TV. I'm calling it a wrap. I'll see you guys either on Sunday or next week. And like I said, if you like what I do here, come check us out over at alphawolftrading.com or email me at tim@alphawolftrading. Have a great weekend.